Ventilators have emerged as a crucial weapon in hospital coronavirus treatment. They move air in and out of the lungs for critically ill patients whose infections have made it impossible to breathe on their own. But hospitals around the world are struggling with ventilator shortages, and manufacturing efforts aren't moving fast enough to meet the rising need. This has spurred a number of engineers, universities, and medical professionals into action. For several weeks, they've been gathering in Facebook groups, Slack channels, and websites to share expertise, ideas, and designs for homemade ventilators.
And then it goes into one of these valves here, which controls inflating these bags at the back.
But will any of these open source plans ever turn into real ventilators that actually help save lives? MIT recently launched this website to resurface a 10-year-old project to automate a hand-pumped ventilator, also known as a manual resuscitator. In 2010, they published a paper detailing their design and testing. Now, a group of engineers and medical professionals in Colombia are using MIT's plans in an effort to mass-produce emergency ventilators in Medellín.
The idea is try to get some machines together that they can make at a cost of about $1,000, $1,300, something like that. And this is a machine that's actually far simpler than the machines that you might find, say, in a hospital right now in Bogota or in New York or in Mexico City. It can cost $30,000, $35,000, $45,000. These are definitely sort of emergency machines.
The current unprecedented global demand has made importing ventilators or even their parts difficult everywhere and virtually impossible in developing countries like Colombia. InnspiraMED has partnered with a number of domestic automotive and home appliance manufacturers to build locally. They're also working with Colombia's version of the FDA called INVIMA to make sure their devices meet all of the country's federal safety standards.
So they're having discussions with them, they're having to turn in paperwork and get approval for the next step to test these prototypes on human beings. And if that works well, then they will be getting the approval to produce these in the factories in Medellín.
InnspiraMED hopes INVIMA approval moves quickly enough to have 1,500 machines manufactured and operating in hospitals by May, when epidemiologists predict Colombia will hit the peak of coronavirus infections. In other parts of the world, another group of medical professionals, academics, and engineers recently published a different proof of concept for an emergency ventilator that can be built without the help of local manufacturers or factories.
We sit with the doctors in the beginning and say, okay, give us the medical minimum that a ventilator needs to achieve. And we'll strip down and try to design a machine that was so simple that you can build it everywhere in the world. This is a last resort machine.
Unregulated and more widely available materials mean an even more accessible ventilator. But there are risks that come with using parts like construction materials in a medical setting. Regulations for medical equipment are much more stringent than for commercial hardware.
Just the level of testing, the level of reliability, redundancy, duration of use, the duty cycle, and how long things are expected to perform. They're different for different settings.
Dr. Pankaj Murchia worries that some of these open-source ventilator systems could fail in practice even after successful tests with a prototype.
Which you're turning on and off your garden sprinklers or your lawn sprinkler once a week, they just aren't designed to do this 20,000 times a day without missing a breath.
Dr. Murchia is working on developing adapters to repurpose CPAP machines as ventilators. CPAP machines, which are much less expensive and more common than ventilators, help patients with sleep apnea maintain a steady breathing pattern throughout the night.
There are about 60 million Americans who have sleep apnea, and there's over 1 million of these machines currently in the United States.
We're converting the BiPAP machines.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo recently announced State Department health approval and plans to convert BiPAP machines, which are similar to CPAPs, into ventilators. And while this kind of solution makes sense for places like the U.S., it doesn't help solve shortage problems in areas lacking these sleep aid devices.
If you have nothing available and you're in a battlefield and someone gets shot by a bullet, instead of using a preformed tourniquet, if you take off your own belt to prevent them from bleeding out and dying, that's okay because you had nothing better available. So depending upon what's available to you in the healthcare system where you're located, available in that it's there now when you need it, you have to make the best choice available.